I transferred all of my mother's money to your account, baby. Tomorrow we are leaving this old woman behind." Those words hung in the air of my hallway. It was as if someone had frozen time. I remained motionless with my hand resting against the wall so I would not collapse. The voice of my son Michael continued to echo from his bedroom. The phone he held against his ear seemed like a strange, almost sinister object. It was like a conduit through which my entire life was escaping. "I am Emily Harrison. I am 67 years old, and until that moment I thought I knew my own son. I live in a quiet neighborhood in Oakwood, a suburb in the Midwest, where I've spent the last 40 years. I became a widow 7 years ago when my husband Robert, a colonel in the Army, passed away after a short but fierce battle with cancer. He left me this house and his life savings. I had worked as a seamstress since I was young, creating wedding gowns that were famous throughout the state. Our calloused hands had built a modest but solid fortune, and now my own son planned to steal it all from me. I felt a bitter taste rising in my throat as I continued to listen, motionless, like a statue of salt. No, Jessica, she does not suspect a thing." Michael continued with a giggle I had never heard before. "The old woman thinks I am helping her with her investments. Can you believe it? $200,000, baby. Enough to start over in Cabo, away from this freezing cold, away from her constant complaints, away from this mediocre life." Every word was a stab in the heart. He did not just plan to rob me. He despised me. He called me old woman with that disdainful tone, as if my 67 years were a contagious disease, as if they were not years of sacrifice, many of them dedicated precisely to him. I backed away silently down the hallway, my slippers barely grazing the old wooden floor. I did not want him to know I had hurt him. Not yet. I needed to think. I needed to process what I had just discovered. I reached the kitchen and sat at the round table where I had served him his favorite meals so many times, where I had listened to his problems, where I had celebrated his scarce achievements. My mind traveled back looking for clues I might have overlooked. Michael had always been a difficult child, problematic in school, inconsistent in college, which he never finished, unstable in jobs that rarely lasted more than a few months. I always hoped he would mature, that he would find his path. Even when he returned home 3 months ago after his supposed divorce, now I wondered if that too had been a lie. Part of me was secretly glad to have him close again to take care of him like when he was little. How naive I had been. How blind, how stupidly maternal. The tears threatened to spill, but I held them back firmly. This was not the moment to cry. It was the moment to act, because the truth is, although the confirmation destroyed my soul, it was not completely unexpected. The suspicions had started weeks ago. First it was small things. Bank documents moved from their place. My phone borrowed when I left it. Charging overly interested questions about my savings, about the sale of the lake house that had belonged to my mother. Then phone conversations that ceased abruptly when I entered the room. A woman named Jessica, who was supposedly his co-worker in a job that never seemed to require him to leave the house. One night, just 2 weeks ago, I found him asleep on the sofa with my tablet in his hands. When I took it back, I saw he had been browsing my banking app. It was then that the suspicion transformed into a painful certainty that now only needed to be confirmed. And the confirmation had just arrived, brutal and unfiltered, heard by accident, while I was heading to prepare my 5 o'clock chamomile tea. "Calm down, Emily," I told myself, breathing deeply. Think. What options did I have? I could confront him immediately, scream at him, kick him out of the house. But what would I achieve? Denials, excuses, perhaps even causing him to accelerate his plans. I could simply change the passwords to my accounts, but that would only stop the problem momentarily without addressing the betrayal itself. No, I needed something more definitive. Something that would not only protect my money, but teach him a lesson he would never forget. In that moment, I remembered Sheriff Miller. Sheriff Miller had been a friend of my late husband since high school. Now, close to retiring, he remained a respected figure in the community. He would know what to do, how to proceed legally. I also thought of Linda, the manager at the bank, where I had kept my savings for 3 decades. A woman who would understand perfectly what it means when someone tries to take advantage of an old woman, as my son so affectionately called me. I looked at the wall clock. It was 5:15 in the afternoon. The bank would close in 45 minutes. If I hurried, I could speak with Linda today. I took my purse and keys with hands that no longer trembled. I stopped in front of the hallway mirror to check my appearance. A woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun returned my gaze. Wrinkles around the eyes and mouth, but a firm, determined look. It was not the look of a victim. It was the look of someone who has survived wars, sickness, and loss. Someone who would not let herself be defeated easily. "Are you going out, Mom?" Michael's voice startled me. He was standing at the entrance of the hallway with his cell phone still in his hand, watching me with a smile I now recognized as fake. "Yes, son, I need to buy some thread to finish the dress for Margaret granddaughter. I will not be long." The lie came out with surprising naturalness from my lips. I had never been good at lying. Robert always said he could read me like an open book, but now with adrenaline running through my veins, I seemed to have developed a sudden talent for deception. "Do you want me to go with you?" he offered with that solicitous tone that before seemed attentive and now sounded calculating. "It is not necessary, dear. Take the chance to rest. I made bread pudding this morning. It is in the fridge if you want some." I went out to the street, feeling his gaze on my back. The fresh June air hit my face, helping me clear my thoughts. The Oakwood neighborhood was quiet at that hour. Some children playing in the town square, elderly folks drinking iced tea on the benches, under the oak trees, the usual routine of any Tuesday. No one could imagine the storm developing inside me as I walked with determined steps toward the community bank. As I advanced, a plan began to form in my mind. I would not be a passive victim in this story. I would not be the old woman easy to fool that my son believed I was. I would show him that underestimating me had been his biggest mistake. I would prepare a surprise he would never forget. The community bank maintained that stately air of old financial institutions, marble columns, dark wood counters, employees in formal suits, even in the 21st century. I entered with purpose and asked for Linda at the reception. The young woman told me to wait a moment while she called her. 5 minutes later, Linda appeared through a side door. Her brown hair with silver streaks perfectly styled her tailored suit, impeccable as always. We had known each other for 30 years since I opened my first account after marrying Robert. She'd seen my son grow up. She'd managed our finances for decades. Emily, what a pleasant surprise. She greeted me with a hug. Her smile faded when she saw my expression. "Is something wrong?" "I need to speak with you in private, Linda. It is urgent." She led me to her office, a cozy space overlooking the main square, the walls covered in university degrees and banking awards. She closed the door and offered me a seat. "Is Michael trying to rob me?" I declared without preamble. The words came out rough, almost painful in my throat. It was the first time I pronounced them out loud, making the betrayal even more real. Linda looked at me, staring intently, processing my words. She showed no surprise, which unsettled me slightly. "Tell me what happened, Emily." She finally responded, leaning forward. I told her everything. The initial suspicions, the small clues, and finally the phone conversation I had accidentally overheard. While I spoke, Linda took notes in a small notebook, nodding occasionally. "Emily," she said when I finished, "I'm very sorry to hear this, but I must be honest with you. A week ago, Michael came to the bank with a power of attorney apparently signed by you requesting full access to your accounts. I felt the floor opening beneath my feet. A power of attorney. I never signed such a document." "I suspected it," Linda continued. "The signature looked authentic, but something in his behavior alerted me. I told him we needed additional verification and time to process the document. I did not give him immediate access. A wave of gratitude invaded me. Linda caution had delayed my son plans. "The document is a fake," I stated with vehemence. "Robert always said one must be cautious with legal powers. I would never sign something like that without consulting you first." Linda nodded, pulling a folder from her drawer. "We have options, Emily. We can block all your accounts immediately. We can file a report for attempted fraud, or—" She stopped as if evaluating whether she should continue. "Or what?" I asked. "Or we can set a trap, let him believe his plan is working while we document everything for the authorities." The idea provoked a chill, not from fear, but from a strange sense of poetic justice. "Explain to me how that would work," I asked, feeling a determination I thought forgotten rising inside me. "First, we must speak with Sheriff Miller," Linda responded. "We need legal and police advice. If you are willing, I can call him right now." I nodded. While Linda made the call, my mind wandered to the past. 3 months ago, when Michael returned home after his supposed divorce, I had been genuinely happy. After years living alone, the company of my only son seemed like a gift from heaven. At first, everything seemed perfect. He helped me with groceries, fixed small things around the house, taught me to use apps on my phone. "Mom, you need to get modern," he would say, laughing when I got confused with technology. "Let me help you with that." It was precisely that help that I now recognized as the start of his plan. He convinced me to install banking apps on my phone, supposedly to make my life easier. "It is safer than going to the bank with all that cash, Mom," he insisted. "Plus you can see your balances at any time." Linda's voice brought me back to the present. "Sheriff Miller will be here in 20 minutes. He says do not do anything until we reach an agreement on how to proceed." During the wait, Linda reviewed my accounts. The wealth that Michael intended to steal amounted to exactly $217,463. It was not a fortune by current standards, but it represented the work of a lifetime. The investment property we sold after Robert's death, the savings from my work as a seamstress, the small inheritance from my parents, everything I had accumulated thinking of a quiet old age and eventually helping my son. What irony. Sheriff Miller arrived punctual as always. At 60 years old, he maintained the straight posture and distinguished bearing of someone who has spent decades enforcing the law. The uniform fit him as well as it did 40 years ago, when he and Robert were young recruits. The three of us sat in Linda's office while the last lights of the afternoon filtered through the windows. Sheriff Miller listened attentively to my story, his expression hardening progressively. "That boy was never good," he murmured when I finished. "Robert knew it. He tried to discipline him, but—" He interrupted himself as if he had been about to reveal something he should not. But I knew what he referred to. My late husband and my son always had a complicated relationship. Robert, strict and straight as an arrow, never knew how to handle Michael's volatile temper. Emily continued the sheriff. "What your son attempts to do is a serious crime. Forgery of documents, attempted fraud, breach of trust against an elderly person. He could face years in prison." The word prison echoed in my head. However betrayed I felt, the idea of my only son behind bars caused me a sharp pain. "What are my options?" I asked. "Legally, you have several," he responded. "We can file a formal complaint right now. We can wait for him to try to make the transfer and catch him in the act, which would result in a more severe conviction. Or we can try an intermediate approach. What do you suggest?" Sheriff Miller exchanged a look with Linda, the same thing Linda thought. A trap, but well-planned, legal, and documented. During the next hour, the three of us drafted a meticulous plan. Linda would create a special account that would seem to belong to Jessica Michael accomplice. Any transfer he made thinking it was to that account would actually remain under my legal control, but it would look successful from his perspective. "We will need solid evidence," Sheriff Miller explained. "Recordings, witnesses, documentation of the entire process. And above all, Emily, we will need you to keep calm and follow the script exactly." "Do you think you can do it?" asked Linda with concern. "You will have to act normally in front of him while all this happens." I thought of the wedding gowns I had sewn for decades. of how my hands had to remain steady even when the bride's nerves created tension in the room, of how I had maintained my composure during Robert Long's illness, smiling for him while my heart broke a little every day. I can do it, I affirmed with security. Before leaving the bank, the three of us established a schedule. Linda would set up the trap account that same night. Sheriff Miller would gather a small team of trusted officers for the operation. I should keep my routine exactly the same. Perhaps even give Michael the opportunity to access my phone or computer again, feigning ignorance. "One last thing," said the sheriff when we were saying goodbye. "Is there anyone else who can help us?" A neighbor, a close friend who can serve as an additional witness. I thought immediately of Mr. Wilson, my widowed neighbor who lived in the house next door. At 70 years old, the former private security agent maintained a sharp mind and an attentive eye to everything that happened on the block. He had been a friend of Robert, and after becoming widowers, we had developed a friendship based on mutual respect and occasional company. Mr. Wilson could help us, I suggested. He has experience in security, and Michael would never suspect him. The sheriff nodded. "Excellent. I will speak with him tomorrow first thing." I returned home when it was already dark. The lights were on, and the aroma of freshly cooked food floated in the air. Michael had cooked pasta, my favorite dish, another manipulation I now viewed with painful clarity. "Mom, I got worried when I saw you were taking so long," he greeted me from the kitchen. "I thought you were only going for thread. I ran into Martha and her granddaughters." I lied, hanging up my coat. "You know how those conversations are. Impossible to cut them short. I made carbonara," he announced with a smile that now seemed like that of a stranger. "And I opened that wine you were saving for special occasions." "And what is the occasion?" I asked, trying to make my voice sound normal. "Do we need one?" "I just wanted to spoil my favorite mother." We ate amidst trivial conversations. Michael spoke of a supposed job interview he would have the following week, of future plans that I knew perfectly well he did not intend to keep. I nodded, smiled at the right moments, even laughed at his jokes while my heart turned to stone. After dinner, as if anticipating my wishes, he prepared chamomile tea. "So you sleep well, Mom," he said with fake concern. "I have noticed you are a bit tense lately." "Thanks, son," I replied, taking the cup. "You know, I was thinking of making some changes to my investments. Perhaps you could help me with that tomorrow." I saw the glint of immediate interest in his eyes. The hook had been cast, and he, like the predator he believed he was, did not hesitate to bite it. "Of course, Mom. You know the economy is complicated. You have to be smart with money these days." "You were always good with numbers," I praised him, savoring the irony. "I trust you with these things." That night, while trying to sleep, memories of Michael as a child invaded my mind. His first day of school, his scraped knees after falling off his bike, his high school graduation. At what moment had he become this calculating stranger, capable of betraying his own mother? I remembered a conversation with Robert shortly before his death. We were in the hospital during one of his last lucid nights before the morphine united them in a state of semi-consciousness. "Emily," he had told me with a weak voice, "when I am gone, be careful with Michael. He is not what he seems." At that moment, I attributed his words to the medication and the pain. Now I wondered if Robert had seen something in our son that I, blinded by maternal love, had refused to acknowledge for decades. The next morning early, I received a message from the sheriff confirming that Mr. Wilson had agreed to help us. Linda informed me that the trap account was set up and ready. Everything was in motion. During breakfast, I casually left my phone on the table while I went to get more coffee. From the kitchen, I watched how Michael grabbed it quickly, unlocking it with the pattern he had surely seen me use hundreds of times. His fingers moved nimbly across the screen, probably accessing the banking app. A satisfied smile crossed his face before returning the phone to its original place. "The coffee is delicious today, Mom," he commented when I returned to the table. "A new recipe," I replied naturally. "Do you feel like accompanying me to the mall later? I need to buy some things. "I am sorry, I have to do some important errands," he excused himself. "Exactly as I expected. Perhaps tomorrow." "Sure, no problem. I will take the chance to visit Father Sebastian then. It has been a while since I went to the parish." I saw the shadow of worry in his eyes. Michael knew the priest was one of the few who had always seen through his facade of the perfect son. The rest of the day passed with apparent normality, me knitting on the porch, Michael coming and going with vague excuses. At dusk, I received another message from the sheriff. "Everything ready for tomorrow. The trap is set." That night, while preparing dinner, Michael received a call. He walked away toward the garden to talk, but left the door ajar. Fragments of his conversation reached the kitchen. "Yes, everything is ready. Tomorrow I make the transfer. I already checked. The money is there. See you at the airport at midnight." I continued stirring the soup as if I had heard nothing. My heart beat strongly, but no longer from pain but from anticipation. The pieces were in place. The trap was ready. My son believed he was one step away from disappearing with the fruit of my lifelong work. What he did not know is that his old mother had prepared a surprise he would never forget. The night passed slowly, interminable. Every creak of the old house startled me. Every shadow seemed to contain invisible threats. It was not fear I felt, but a strange mixture of anticipation and sadness. While trying to fall asleep, I went over the details of the plan we had drafted mentally. At dawn, when the first rays of sun filtered through the embroidered curtains I had made myself years ago, my phone vibrated softly. It was a message from the sheriff. In position. "Mr. Wilson is ready too. Follow the plan exactly as agreed." I got up careful not to make noise. The clock marked 6:15 in the morning. Michael normally did not wake up until past 9, which gave me enough time to prepare the last details. I dressed with care, choosing an outfit I reserved for special occasions. A navy blue skirt and a cream blouse with small embroidery on the collar, a gift from my late friend Claudia. If I was going to face the most difficult day of my life, I would do it feeling strong. In the kitchen, I prepared coffee and croissants like any normal morning. The aroma of fresh coffee flooded the house, a daily routine that contrasted brutally with the extraordinary nature of the situation. While the coffee brewed, I went out discreetly to the backyard where Mr. Wilson waited for me by the lemon tree. "Good morning, Emily." He greeted me in a low voice. His weathered face reflected worry. The sheriff updated me on everything. "I am very sorry. Thanks for helping me, Mr. Wilson," I replied, trying to make my voice sound firm. "Everything is ready. I installed small cameras here and here," he indicated, pointing to strategic points in the garden and the back entrance. "They are discreet but capture audio and video with perfect clarity. The sheriff has direct access to the feed from his vehicle. Mr. Wilson had worked for 3 decades for a private security firm before retiring. His experience proved invaluable now. Remember, he continued, the recording device is in your brooch." He pointed to the small butterfly brooch he had given me yesterday, now pinned to my blouse. "It looks decorative, but it captures everything that happens inside the house." I nodded, grateful for his meticulousness. "When Michael makes the transfer, you will receive a notification on your phone," he explained. "It is crucial that you act normally, as if you had not seen it. Let him believe his plan is working. And if he decides to flee immediately after," I asked, expressing my greatest concern, "he will not be able to. The sheriff has placed plainclothes officers watching all exits. The taxi driver who will come to pick him up tonight is actually an agent. Besides, Jessica is under surveillance since yesterday. The mention of that woman accomplice in the plan to rob me caused a pang of curiosity. Do you know anything about her?" Mr. Wilson hesitated a moment before responding. "The sheriff says she has a record for similar scams in other states. Apparently, she specializes in helping children appropriate the assets of their elderly parents, a professional of evil." The idea turned my stomach. "I have to go back inside," I murmured, noticing I had spent too much time outside. Michael could wake up at any moment. "I will be watching all day," assured Mr. Wilson. "Anything you need, just open the bathroom window. It is our emergency signal." I returned to the kitchen just as I heard movement in the hallway. Michael appeared in the doorway, disheveled and with a sleepy face. He wore the blue pajamas I had given him for Christmas, looking momentarily like the son he had once been. "Good morning, Mom. You are up early today." The pain in my knees did not let me sleep. I lied, serving coffee in 2 cups. Croissants. We ate breakfast, talking about trivialities, the cool June weather, the local newspaper news, the plans for the garden. If I did not know what I knew, it would have been a perfectly normal morning between mother and son. By the way, I mentioned casually while picking up the plates, "Today I would like to go to the bank to review those investments we mentioned. Could you accompany me?" I saw the flash of alarm in his eyes, quickly disguised. Sure, but wouldn't it be easier to do it from the phone? I showed you how to use the banking app, remember? You know, I do not trust those modern things entirely, son. I prefer to speak with real people, see signed papers." Michael ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "It is just that I have that job interview at 11. I had told you." "Right, I forgot completely," I exclaimed, feigning distress. "My head these days. Do not worry, I will go alone then." "No, wait," he rushed to say. "What do you think if I help you with the app right now? You can see all your accounts, make transfers, everything from the comfort of home. It is what everyone does now." I smiled internally. The fish was biting the hook. "Well, if you insist, my phone is on the living room table." During the next half hour, Michael gave me a crash course on mobile banking. He showed me every function of the app, including how to make transfers, with the forced patience of someone who has a hidden objective. I feigned confusion at the right moments, asking him to repeat certain instructions, appearing clumsy with technology. "See? It is very simple," he concluded finally. "You do not need to go to the bank for anything." "How wonderful," I exclaimed with fake enthusiasm. "Although I still prefer talking to Linda for important things. It gives me more security." His expression darkened slightly at the mention of Linda. "People like Linda will soon be replaced by App's mom. It is the future." "I suppose you are right," I conceded. "By the way, I will leave my phone charging while I go to the market. Do you need me to buy anything special for lunch?" "No, do not worry. In fact, I might not eat lunch here. The interview could run long." Another lie. According to what we had discovered, there was no such interview. He would probably use that time to finalize details with Jessica. I left for the market with an unnecessarily long shopping list, giving him ample time to act. The sheriff had assured me that the phone was configured to register any activity and send alerts to our team. My absence would be the perfect opportunity for Michael to make the transfer he planned. The Oakwood market buzzed with activity. Vendors announcing their products, housewives haggling over prices, children running between the stalls. The normality of the scene contrasted with the drama unfolding in my life. I stopped at Mrs. Josephine Erb's stall, buying fresh mint and rosemary with deliberate slowness. "Are you okay?" Emily asked the elderly herbalist, scrutinizing me with sharp eyes that had seen too much in her 80-something years. "You have a shadow in your gaze today." "I am fine, Josephine, just a little tired." She murmured, not very convinced. She carefully selected some leaves from a plant I did not recognize and added them to my purchase. "Linden tea for the nerves. Do not ask me how, but I know you will need it." I appreciated her gesture with a trembling smile. The town had always had that quality, everyone connected in invisible ways, perceptive to changes in the air, to the storms that were approaching. While I wandered through the market, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from the sheriff. "Transfer completed. $217,000. The trap worked perfectly. Continue as planned." My heart skipped a beat. Michael had taken the definitive step. There was no turning back. With trembling hands, I replied with a simple "understood," and I continued my shopping as if nothing had happened, although I felt the world had just changed beneath my feet. I returned home an hour later, loaded with bags of products we would probably never use. Michael received me at the door, unusually solicitous, helping me with the groceries. His face showed a serenity I now recognized as the satisfaction of the predator after a successful hunt. Let me help you with that, Mom. You should not carry weight with your knees. Thanks, son. Always so considerate. The charade continued during lunch. Michael had canceled his supposed interview, preparing instead a breaded chicken dish he knew I liked. He talked animatedly about fictitious future plans, about projects he would never realize about a tomorrow. He planned to spend very far from me, enjoying the money he thought he had stolen. I was thinking, he commented while pouring more wine into my glass, that you could consider selling this house. It is too big for you alone when I find work and move out. Sell your father house, I do not know if I could. Memories are carried in the heart. Mom, not in the walls, he philosophized with fake wisdom. You could buy a smaller apartment, easier to maintain, and the extra money from the sale would give you more peace of mind. More money for you to steal from me, I thought. It is an interesting idea, I responded instead. I will sleep on it. The afternoon passed between routine activities, me knitting on the porch, Michael apparently busy with his laptop, but I noticed how he constantly checked the time, how he answered messages with increasing frequency, the anxiety of the imminent escape. At 6 in the afternoon, I received another update from the sheriff. Jessica just bought 2 tickets to Cabo, midnight flight. Agent taxi driver confirmed for 10:30 p.m. All perimeter secured. The operation was advancing as predicted. I headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner, choosing deliberately Michael's favorite dish, chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes. A last symbolic dinner before the final judgment. While I cooked, I heard Michael talking on the phone in whispers from his room. The door ajar allowed me to catch fragments. Everything ready. The money is in your account. The old woman suspects nothing. Yes, I made sure. The taxi at 10:30. Take only the essentials. New life. Every word was a stab, but also a confirmation. There was no longer any doubt about his intentions. Dinner was surreal. Michael praised my cooking, recalled anecdotes from his childhood, even proposed a toast to good times. It was as if in his last hours before the final betrayal, he wanted to absolve his conscience through a pantomime of filial affection. Mom, he said while we cleared the plates, I want you to know that I have always loved you in my own way. For a second, a brief instant, I wondered if there was a glimmer of genuine remorse in his words, but his calculating gaze evaluating my reaction brought me back to reality. I know, son, I responded softly. I have also always loved you even when you have disappointed me. I saw a flash of unease in his eyes at my words, quickly replaced by a forced smile. What are you saying? When have I disappointed you? Oh, we all make mistakes. It does not matter now. At 9 at night, Michael announced he would go to sleep early. I am exhausted, Mom. Tomorrow will be a big day. Yes, it will be. I agreed with an enigmatic smile. As soon as I heard his bedroom door close, I sent a message to the sheriff confirming that everything was still according to plan. The answer came immediately. We are ready. Remember, when you hear the signal, stay in your room until I call you. I retired to my bedroom, changing into the nightgown and robe I usually wore to sleep. However, I did not lie down. Instead, I sat in the rocking chair by the window, watching the night envelop the Oakwood neighborhood. The lights of the neighboring houses went out one by one, while the crescent moon cast silver shadows on the old rooftops. At 10:20 p.m., I heard furtive movements in Michael's room. Cautious steps, the unmistakable sound of a suitcase being dragged. I remained absolutely motionless, breathing with forced calm, my heart hammering in my chest. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang discreetly. The taxi had arrived. I heard Michael open the front door with extreme care, whispering something to the driver, then silence. I waited, counting the seconds mentally. 30, 40, 50. The explosion of activity was sudden and deafening. Authoritative voices identifying themselves as police, the sound of struggle. Michael's surprised exclamation, then the house doorbell rang insistently. It was the signal. I got up slowly from the rocking chair and headed to the front door. The scene that greeted me would be etched in my memory forever. Michael handcuffed next to the police vehicle, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Sheriff Miller reading him his rights uniformed officers, documenting the scene. And across the street, another patrol car where a young woman, presumably Jessica, protested vehemently while being put into the vehicle. When Michael saw me, his eyes widened with surprise. Then they narrowed with fury. "You!" he growled, comprehension illuminating his face. "You set a trap for me." I approached slowly, feeling the gazes of the officers of the neighbors who were starting to peek out their windows, attracted by the commotion. "No, son," I responded with a clear voice that resonated in the silent night. "You set the trap for yourself. I just gave you enough rope to hang yourself with it." The time seemed to stop on that street in Oakwood. The patrol lights dyed the colonial facades blue and red, creating an almost cinematic scene. The neighbors, some in pajamas, others still dressed, began to congregate at a safe distance, whispering among themselves, pointing discreetly at the scene unfolding in front of my house. Michael's expression transitioned from shock to fury, and finally to something I had never seen on his face: defeat. His shoulders, always erect with arrogance, slumped visibly when he understood the magnitude of what was happening. Mrs. Harrison approached the sheriff with professional formality, conscious of the witnesses. "We need your official statement. Can we come in?" I nodded, unable to articulate words at that moment. As we headed toward the entrance, Michael tried to get my attention. "Mom, this is a misunderstanding," he yelled, desperation evident in his voice. "I can explain everything. Do not believe them. You know I would never hurt you." I stopped and turned slowly. Our gazes met under the yellow light of the street lamp. For an instant, I saw the child I had raised, the rebellious teenager, the troubled young man, all versions of my son superimposed on the adult man, who now looked at me pleadingly. "No more lies, Michael," I responded with a calm I did not know I possessed. "The recordings, the transfers, the forged documents, everything is documented." "Recordings?" His face paled. "Have you been spying on me in my own house?" "In my house," I corrected. "The house your father built with his honest work. The house you wanted to sell as soon as you had robbed me down to the last cent." An officer approached Michael and led him toward the police vehicle. As they put him in the back seat, I could see how his gaze searched for something or someone in the crowd of onlookers, probably Jessica, without knowing she was already in the other patrol car facing her own charges. My living room, normally cozy with its antique furniture and family photos, transformed quickly into an improvised police station. Officers took notes, photographed documents, installed recording equipment. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one where Robert used to read the newspaper every afternoon, feeling strangely alien in my own home. "We need you to tell us everything from the beginning," indicated a young officer named Officer Morales, in charge of taking my statement. Every detail, no matter how insignificant it seems. During the next hour, I recounted everything. The first suspicions, the overheard conversations, the visit to the bank, the plan drafted with the sheriff and Linda, the trap account, the recordings. My voice sounded mechanical even to my own ears, as if I were narrating someone else's story. A police case I had seen in one of those TV series Robert enjoyed. "You did the right thing," Emily assured Sheriff Miller when I finished resting his hand briefly on my shoulder. "Many people in your situation do not have the courage to face something like this. It is not about courage." I responded, finally feeling the emotional weight of everything that occurred. It is about justice and teaching. Close to midnight, when the officers finally began to withdraw, Mr. Wilson appeared at the door, his face a mixture of worry and relief. "You should not stay alone tonight," he suggested. "My niece Louise has an extra room, or I can stay here on the sofa." The idea of spending the night in that house, surrounded by memories and now new ghosts, became suddenly unbearable. "I accept your niece offer," I decided. "I just need to pack some things." While I prepared a small suitcase with the essentials, my gaze stopped on the family photo that occupied a privileged place on my nightstand. Robert, Michael, and I on that trip to Niagara Falls when Michael was 12. Genuine smiles, sincere hugs, a family that seemed perfectly happy. Where had it all started to go wrong? At what moment had my son stopped being that child to become a man capable of betraying his own mother so deeply? The question would torment me for a long time. Louise' house, a cozy modern construction on the outskirts of town, received me with the warmth I needed so much. Despite having known each other only superficially at neighborhood celebrations, Mr. Wilson Niece treated me like a beloved aunt, preparing me linden tea and readying the guest room with care. My uncle told me the basics, she said, while accompanying me to the room. You do not need to explain anything, just rest. Sleep, however, refused to visit me that night. I remained awake, watching the unfamiliar ceiling, reliving again and again the events of the last weeks. When the first rays of sun filtered through the window, they found me exhausted but resigned. A new day was beginning, and with it a life I had never imagined for my old age. At 9 a.m, Sheriff Miller called to inform me he needed my presence at the station to formalize the complaint. Louise insisted on accompanying me, a silent but comforting presence by my side during the ride. The police station buzzed with activity officers coming and going, phones ringing constantly, civilians waiting to file various types of complaints. They led me to an office in the back, quieter and more private. Michael has requested to see you, Sheriff Miller informed me without preamble once we were seated. He is in a temporary holding cell. The judge will decide today if he grants bail or preventive detention while the case is instructed. The idea of facing my son provoked contradictory sensations. On one hand, I feared he would try to manipulate me again. On the other, I needed to confront him, understand, perhaps even find some kind of closure. What do you recommend? I asked. Sheriff Miller reflected a moment before responding. Professionally, I would tell you it is not necessary. We already have enough evidence to proceed with charges. Personally, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Personally, I think you need that moment, Emily, to heal. Half an hour later, I found myself in a small room divided by glass. On the other side, Michael appeared escorted by a guard. He wore the same clothes from the night before, now wrinkled. His face showed evident signs of a sleepless night. Deep circles, stubble, red eyes. We looked at each other in silence for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, it was he who spoke first, his voice slightly distorted by the intercom. I guess I should congratulate you, he said with a bitter smile. The naive old woman turned out to be smarter than all of us. I did not come here to receive your congratulations nor your insults, I responded calmly. I came to ask you something that torments me. Why Michael? What did I do to you to deserve this? His dry laugh resonated in the small booth. What did you do to me? Nothing, Mom, absolutely nothing. And that is precisely the problem. I do not understand. Of course you do not understand, he continued, leaning forward. You never understood. Dad was always the strict one, the disciplinarian, the one who demanded excellence. And you simply existed in his shadow, letting him mold me according to his impossible expectations. You never defended me. You never intervened when his methods became cruel. His words hit me with the force of an unexpected revelation. Was that how he saw our family dynamic, as an absent mother who allowed abuse? I remembered the arguments between Robert and Michael, increasingly frequent during his adolescence, the punishments I considered severe but justified. Had I been complicit by omission? Your father loved you, I managed to articulate. In his own way. His way, repeated Michael with disdain. His way destroyed me, Mom, and you allowed it. So yes, when I returned 3 months ago, I had a plan. It was not spontaneous. Jessica and I had been planning it for almost a year, waiting for the right moment. I felt guilt perhaps at the beginning, but then I remembered every humiliation, every time he made me feel insufficient, every time you stayed silent while he destroyed my self-esteem, and the guilt disappeared. I listened to his version with growing consternation, not because it justified his actions, but because it contained enough grains of truth to be painful. Robert had been strict, sometimes excessively, and I, fearful of contradicting him, of provoking marital conflicts, had often opted for silence. "None of that justifies what you tried to do," I said finally. "I do not seek justification." He responded, surprising me. "I only give you the answer you came looking for. Now you have your why. Does it make you feel better?" "No," I admitted, "but perhaps one day it will help us both find some peace." I got up to leave, feeling I had obtained what I needed, even if it was painfully different from what I expected. "Do you know what is ironic?" added Michael when I was already heading to the door. "I always imagined that when I finally confronted all this, I would feel liberated, but now I just feel empty." Our gazes met one last time. "Me too, son," I responded with sincerity. "Me too." The following week passed in a haze of legal procedures, visits to the prosecutor office, consultations with lawyers. The news had spread through Oakwood like fire in dry grass. The seamstress son who tried to steal everything, the colonel widow betrayed by her own son, headlines not written but whispered in every corner of the town. I avoided returning to my house, appreciating Louise's continued hospitality. The idea of inhabiting those rooms now stained by betrayal was unbearable to me. It was Mr. Wilson who suggested a temporary solution. My sister has an empty cabin near the lake. He proposed one afternoon while we drank coffee on Louise Terrace. Nothing luxurious, but quiet. You could stay there while you decide what to do long term. The offer turned out to be providential. 3 days later, I settled into a modest but charming cabin on the shores of Lake Michigan. Wooden walls, a small dock that jutted into calm waters, mountains on the horizon that changed color with every sunset. A place to heal, to reflect, to decide. Linda visited me on the weekend, bringing with her not only pastries from her favorite bakery, but also news. The judge has ordered preventive detention for both, she informed while we shared tea on the porch. The evidence is overwhelming. Forgery of documents, attempted fraud, aggravated by the family bond, illicit association. Michael faces between 3 and 6 years. The number resonated in my head, 3 to 6 years. My son, however guilty, he was locked up during what could be the last years of my life. "Are there no alternatives?" I asked, surprising myself. Linda studied me with sharp eyes. "Are you considering withdrawing charges?" "No," I responded after a moment of reflection. "But perhaps some kind of deal, something that includes psychological treatment, community service." "I will speak with the prosecutor," promised Linda. "He has certain discretion in these cases, especially dealing with a first formal offense." When she left, I stayed contemplating the lake, its waters dyed orange and purple by the imminent sunset. A solitary duck cut through the surface, leaving a perfect wake that gradually faded. Like the certainties of my life, I thought. Like the plans I had made for a quiet old age, surrounded by family. That night, reviewing old photo albums I had brought with me, I found something I had forgotten completely. A small leather-bound notebook hidden between pages of memories. Robert Diary. With trembling hands, I opened it. The yellowed pages contained my husband's neat and orderly handwriting, as characteristic as his methodical personality. April 10th, 1985. Today he turned 6. I gave him his first big bike, as he calls it. He wanted a red one, but I only found blue. He was visibly disappointed, but feigned joy not to upset me. That child has a sensitivity that worries me. The world does not forgive the sensitive. I must toughen him, prepare him for the life that awaits him. Emily does not understand. She thinks I am too severe. Perhaps she is right, but someone must mold him into a strong man. I continued reading entry after entry, silent tears rolling down my cheeks. The diary revealed a very different Robert than the one I thought I knew. A man plagued by insecurities about his capacity as a father, convinced that severity was the only form of true love, tortured by his inability to connect emotionally with his son. September 23, 1990. Another confrontation with Michael. 11 years old and he already defies me openly. I had to punish him harshly. Emily cried afterward when she thought I did not see her. She does not understand that this hurts me more than him. She does not understand I try to save him from becoming someone like my father. Weak, manipulatable, eventually destroyed by his own weaknesses. The revelation hit me like an unexpected wave. Robert, my strict and apparently unbreakable Robert, had been acting from his own unresolved traumas, from his own paternal fears. And I, out of misunderstood respect, out of fear of conflict, had kept silent, allowing that toxic dynamic to flourish under our roof. July 14, 1997. Michael dropped out of college as I imagined he would. He blames me. He says I never gave him options, that I pressured him to follow a career he hated. Perhaps he is right. Perhaps everything I have done has been a mistake. Emily tries to mediate, but it is too late. I see in his eyes something that terrifies me. The same resentment I felt toward my own father. The history repeats itself, and I do not know how to stop it. I read until dawn, discovering truths that had remained hidden for decades under the veneer of our apparent family normality. When I closed the diary with the first rays of sun filtering through the curtains, a certainty had formed inside me. We were all guilty and victims at the same time in this story. Michael had chosen the path of deceit and betrayal and had to face the consequences of his acts. But Robert and I had laid the foundations of that outcome with our own actions and omissions. I took the phone and dialed Sheriff Miller's number. When he answered, my voice sounded clear and decided. I need you to help me arrange a visit with the prosecutor. I think I have relevant information for my son's case. The office of Prosecutor Reynolds seemed designed to intimidate. Dark and heavy furniture shelves full of thick legal volumes, a narrow window that barely allowed light to pass. The prosecutor himself, a man of about 50 with prematurely white hair and a penetrating gaze, emanated a quiet but undeniable authority. Mrs. Harrison, he greeted me, indicating I take a seat in front of his desk. Sheriff Miller explained to me that you have new relevant information for your son's case. Sheriff Miller, sitting next to me, gave me a slight nod of encouragement. He had agreed to accompany me not as an officer in this moment, but as a friend of the family. That is right, I confirmed, placing Robert's diary on the table. I have found something that does not change the facts of the case, but does provide context. During the next hour, I explained to the prosecutor what I had discovered in that small leather notebook. I told him of the complex relationship between Robert and Michael, of the toxic patterns that had perpetuated from generation to generation, of my own role as a silent witness to a damaging family dynamic. I understand your point, Mrs. Harrison, said Reynolds, finally glancing at some entries in the diary. But I must be clear, these family antecedents, although painful, do not constitute a legal justification for the crime committed. I do not seek justification, I responded firmly. My son tried to rob me and must answer for it, but I request considering these circumstances at the moment of deciding the type of penalty. The prosecutor leaned back in his chair, studying me with curiosity. What do you propose exactly? A sentence that includes mandatory psychological therapy, significant community service, preferably with elderly adults, so he understands the value and dignity of people my age. And I hesitated a moment before continuing. The possibility of a conditional sentence after an initial period of incarceration. Reynolds exchanged a look with Sheriff Miller before responding. Ma'am, with all respect, your son and his accomplice planned meticulously to defraud you of all your possessions. They prepared fake documents, manipulated your trust, intended to abandon you without resources in your old age. It is not a minor crime. I know it better than anyone I affirmed holding his gaze. I lived the betrayal in my own flesh, but I also know that true justice is not just about punishment, but about reparation and rehabilitation. Michael needs to understand the gravity of his actions, but he also needs the opportunity to rebuild himself as a person. The prosecutor remained silent, considering my words. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I will present your request to the judge. I cannot promise results, but your perspective as a direct victim will be considered significantly." Upon leaving the prosecutor office, the weight I had carried for weeks seemed slightly lighter, not because I had forgiven Michael. That process was barely beginning and would take time, but because for the first time since I discovered his betrayal, I felt I was acting from wisdom and not just from pain. "Are you sure about this?" Emily asked Sheriff Miller while we walked toward his car. "No," I admitted with honesty, "but I'm sure I need to try for him for me and for Robert." The following days passed in a strange calm. I remained in the cabin by the lake, finding comfort in its isolation. The mornings I dedicated to long walks along the shore, observing the mountains reflected in crystal-clear waters. The afternoons reviewing photo albums and rereading Robert's diary, discovering new layers of complexity in our family history. One week after my visit to the prosecutor, I received an unexpected call. It was Sarah Jenkins, the lawyer Sheriff Miller had recommended to represent me in the case. "I have news, Mrs. Harrison," she announced without preamble. "The prosecutor Reynolds has offered a deal to your son's defense. 3-year sentence with possibility of parole after the first, if he complies satisfactorily with psychological therapy and community service at a senior center." "And Jessica," I asked, remembering the woman who had been an accomplice in this entire plot. "Her case is different. She has records for similar scams in other states. She will face a more severe sentence." After hanging up, I remained a long while on the cabin porch, watching the gentle waves of the lake, processing the news. 3 years, a considerable time, but not an eternity. An opportunity, perhaps, for both of us to heal each in our own way. 2 days later, I requested permission to visit Michael again. This time, instead of the small room divided by glass, they assigned us a supervised room, but more personal. My son entered escorted by a guard who positioned himself discreetly by the door. He looked different, thinner with shorter hair, but also with a strange calm I had not noticed in our last conversation. "Thanks for coming," he said, taking a seat in front of me. "I did not expect to see you so soon. Your lawyer must have informed you about the deal proposed by the prosecutor." I began getting straight to the point. He nodded slowly. "He told me you intervened in my favor, that you handed over Dad's diary. I thought it was important they understood the full context." Michael fiddled nervously with his hands, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he had to confess some mischief. "Why did you do it?" he asked finally. "After what I tried to do to you, why intercede for me?" The question, although expected, made me reflect. Why had I really done it? Simple maternal instinct guilt for my own past omissions, an attempt to atone for our family mistakes. "Because we both deserve something better than perpetuating this cycle," I responded finally. "Your father damaged you with his excessive rigidity. I damaged you with my complicit silence, and you tried to damage me with your betrayal. At some point, someone must have the courage to break the chain." Michael averted his gaze toward the small barred window that showed a fragment of sky. "I read some parts of the diary during the evidence discovery process," he confessed. "I never imagined that he had his own insecurities, his own demons." "Robert grew up with an alcoholic and violent father," I completed. "We never told you. He promised he would be different, but in his attempt to protect you from his own traumas, he ended up creating new ones." A reflective silence settled between us. Outside the distant sound of a police siren, the murmur of conversations in the hallway, the constant tick-tock of the wall clock, I accepted the deal Michael revealed finally. 3 years with possibility of parole after the first. I know. Jessica did not have the same luck. It was her third similar scam, I commented. "Did you know what she did for a living when you met her?" Michael shook his head. "Not at first. By the time I discovered it, she had already convinced me it was a legitimate way to recover what we deserved. She has a gift for twisting reality." "Did you love her?" The question came out spontaneously, born of genuine curiosity. A sad smile crossed his face. "I thought so. Now I am not sure I have ever known what it really means to love someone. Another painful revelation, another failure in our education as parents. The judge has ordered therapy. As part of your sentence, I mentioned changing the subject slightly in community service at a senior center when you get parole. I know. I suppose it is poetic justice, right? The son who wanted to rob his elderly mother, caring for unknown elderly people. Do not see it as a punishment, I suggested. See it as an opportunity to reconnect with the part of you that knows how to care, that knows how to value the experience and wisdom that comes with years. Michael looked at me with an expression I did not know how to interpret. You have become very philosophical, Mom. I have had time to reflect, I responded simply. When the end of our visit approached, I broached a subject that had been circling my mind. What will happen to the house? Asked Michael, anticipating my thoughts. I cannot go back there, I admitted. Too many memories, some beautiful, others painful. I am considering selling it. It was Dad's dream. He commented with certain nostalgia. That house represented everything he valued. Stability, tradition, respectability. And for that very reason, I need to let go of it. I explained so I can build something new based on my own values, not Robert values. For the first time in our conversation, I saw a glimmer of genuine understanding in my son's eyes, as if finally he managed to see me not just as his mother, as his father, wife, but as a person with her own identity. Where will you live? I am considering buying the cabin by the lake where I am staying temporarily. It is small but sufficient for me. It has a view that brings peace. Michael nodded, processing the information. Sounds good, Mom. A new beginning. The guard approached, indicating our time had concluded. We stood up simultaneously, facing the uncomfortable moment of farewell. Would a hug be appropriate given the circumstances? Would a handshake be too formal? Finally, I opted for simplicity. I will visit you regularly, I promised. If you want me to come, of course. I want you to, he confirmed with a voice that reminded me of the child he once was. We have a lot to talk about still. A lot, I agreed. Take care, son. While I walked away down the hallway, escorted by another guard toward the exit, I felt a strange mixture of pain and hope. The path toward true reconciliation would be long and difficult. Perhaps we would never fully restore what had been broken, but we had taken the first step. The following weeks brought significant changes. Following Sarah's advice, I hired a real estate agent to sell the house in Oakwood. Surprisingly, he found buyers almost immediately. A young couple with 2 small children eager to settle in a traditional neighborhood. The day I signed the sale papers, I experienced an almost physical liberation, as if every painful memory, every family secret, every lie and omission remained sealed within those walls that now belonged to others. With the money from the sale, I bought the cabin by the lake and established a trust fund for Michael, accessible only when he completed his full sentence. The rest I invested following Linda's advice, ensuring a modest monthly income, but sufficient for my needs. My new life began to take shape slowly. I resumed sewing not as a profession, but as a hobby, creating small decorative pieces I sold at a nearby craft market. I cultivated an herb garden that thrived in the humid climate by the lake. I adopted a dog, an elderly mixed breed that had been abandoned, whom I named Buster, in an act of ironic reconciliation with my past companionship needs. The visits to Michael became regular. Every 2 weeks, bringing him books he requested, listening about his therapy sessions, dialoguing about topics that for decades had been taboo in our family. Painful conversations, but necessary, like cleaning an infected wound that finally begins to heal. 4 months after his arrest, I received an unexpected call from the prison. Michael had requested a special visit outside of regular hours. Alarmed, I went immediately, fearing some bad news. They led me to a different room this time, more spacious and luminous, with a table where diverse materials had been laid out. Papers, pencils, photographs. Michael entered accompanied by a middle-aged woman who introduced herself as his therapist, Dr. Evans. "Thanks for coming so quickly." Mrs. Harrison, the professional, greeted me. Your son has been working on an important therapeutic project and wished to share it with you." I looked questioningly at Michael, who seemed nervous but determined. "It is a family tree," he explained, pointing to the papers on the table, "but not a normal one. Dr. Evans calls it the pattern tree." During the next hour, Michael showed me the intricate diagram he had created, identifying patterns of behavior repeating through the generations of our family. His paternal grandfather, alcoholism; Robert, compensatory rigidity; my complicit silence; his own manipulation and resentment, all connected on a visual map of inherited wounds. The objective, explained Dr. Evans, is to identify these patterns to be able to break them consciously. Michael has done exceptional work recognizing not only how he was damaged, but also how he perpetuated that damage toward others, mainly toward you. I observe my son with new eyes, seeing for the first time the man he could become if he continued on this path of self-knowledge and reparation. Can I add something to the tree I requested, taking a pencil? With careful strokes, I drew a new branch starting from me, labeling it Courage to Break the Cycle, then another emerging from Michael, naming it Will to Heal. When our gazes met, I saw tears in his eyes mirroring my own. "I do not know if one day you will be able to forgive me completely," he said in a low voice. "I do not know if I will be able to forgive myself, but I am trying to understand, I am trying to be better. That is all we can do." I responded, feeling a peace I thought lost forever. Try every day, be better than yesterday. Not for others, but for ourselves. Upon returning to my cabin that night under a starry sky perfectly reflected in the still lake, I understood I had found something I never expected to discover amid so much betrayal and pain, the opportunity for a rebirth not only for Michael, not only for our relationship, but for myself. Emily Harrison, the Colonel widow, the seamstress of wedding gowns, the betrayed mother, was finally emerging as simply Emily, a woman of 67 years who against all odds had found the courage to reclaim her life and write a new chapter when many would think her story was already concluded. Dear friends of the Elderly Stories channel, today I have shared with you one of the most painful and transforming experiences of my life. When I heard my son, Michael, say on the phone, "I transferred all my mother money to your account, baby. Tomorrow we leave this old woman behind," I never imagined that moment of devastation would become the beginning of my personal rebirth. Many of you have written to me asking how I found the strength to face such betrayal. The truth is, it was not a single act of bravery, but a series of small steps, each supported by people who believed in me when I myself doubted. Linda at the bank, who suspected that forged power of attorney. Sheriff Miller, the faithful friend who did not hesitate to help me set the trap that would reveal my son's intentions. Mr. Wilson, my quiet but observant neighbor, who installed those discreet cameras that documented everything. Each of them reminded me that at my 67 years, I was not alone nor defenseless. The night of the arrest, when I saw Michael handcuffed in front of our ancestral home, I felt an indescribable pain mixed with a strange sensation of liberation. I did not celebrate his fall, but my own awakening. For decades, I had lived in the shadow of my late husband, perpetuating toxic patterns without questioning them, allowing complicit silence to slowly destroy our family. The discovery of Robert Diary was perhaps the most revealing moment of this entire odyssey. Those yellowed pages contained the key to understand how we had reached that point. Generations of damage passed like a poisoned torch. My husband, trying to protect our son from the traumas he himself had suffered, ended up inflicting new wounds. I, trying to keep family peace, became an accomplice to that damage, and Michael, seeking revenge for what he perceived as emotional abandonment, resorted to the most painful betrayal imaginable. But my story is not just about betrayal, it is about redemption. It is about the courage to honestly look at our collective mistakes. It is about daring to break destructive cycles, even when it seems too late. The sale of the family home represented much more than a real estate transaction. It was a symbolic act of liberation from the chains of the past. My new life in the small cabin by the lake is not a retreat from the world, but an advance toward an authentic existence, chosen consciously, not inherited nor imposed. The visits to the prison, initially painful, have gradually transformed into opportunities for mutual healing. The family tree of patterns Michael created as part of his therapy has been revealing for both. It does not excuse us from our actions, but allows us to understand them in a broader context, allowing us to actively work on not repeating the same mistakes. When I look back, I see that my son's betrayal, however cruel, forced me to wake up from a lethargy that had lasted decades. Sometimes we need to lose everything to discover who we really are. At my 67 years, when many would consider me at the end of the road, I have discovered I am barely beginning. Age does not determine our capacity to change, to grow, to be reborn. Every sunrise over the lake reminds me of this truth. While we breathe, we have the possibility of writing a new chapter. I address especially you, dear grandmothers and grandfathers listening to me. Perhaps you feel invisible in this society that worships youth. Perhaps you believe your value diminishes with every new wrinkle, with every gray hair. Nothing further from the truth. Our experience, our capacity to forgive, our unique perspective on life are invaluable treasures. Let us not allow anyone to convince us otherwise. If my story has touched you in some way, I ask you two things. First, subscribe to this channel, Elderly Stories. Every week I share reflections and experiences that I hope can illuminate the path of others. It is not just about dramatic stories like the one I narrated today, but also about small daily victories, lessons learned, wisdom accumulated over decades. Second, share your own experiences in the comments. Have you faced family betrayals? Have you had to reinvent yourselves in adulthood? What helped you find strength when everything seemed lost? Your stories not only enrich me, but our entire community. And do not forget to mention from what corner of the world you are watching us. This channel unites voices from all over, creating a support network that transcends borders. I confess something. Creating these videos requires time, effort, and resources. We investigate every topic carefully. We consult with professionals when necessary. We invest in recording equipment to offer you the best possible quality. If you value this work and wish to support us to continue producing content daily, consider making a donation through the platform. Every contribution, however small, allows us to continue bringing these stories to more people who perhaps need them as much as we need to tell them. I also invite you to explore previous videos on the channel. Stories like The Unexpected Inheritance, When My Grandson Taught Me to Use the Internet, or Love After 70 have resonated deeply with our audience. Each video is created with the same care and honesty that characterizes elderly stories. Before saying goodbye, I want to share a final reflection. When Michael despairingly called his mother old without knowing it, he was using a powerful word. Because being old does not mean being weak or irrelevant. It means having survived, having seen enough life to recognize patterns, to value the essential, to distinguish between passing storms and changes that really matter. This old woman speaking to you has learned that it is never too late to reclaim our dignity, to set healthy boundaries, to demand respect. It is never too late to defy expectations, to break molds, to reinvent ourselves. And above all, it is never too late to forgive, not as an act of weakness, but as the highest manifestation of our inner strength. From my small cabin by Lake Michigan, I send you a warm hug. Thanks for accompanying me in this story. Thanks for your comments, which I always read with attention. Thanks for being part of this community that celebrates the wisdom of years. See you next Thursday with another story I hope touches your hearts. Do not forget to activate the bell to receive notifications. And always remember, our age is not a sentence. It is an achievement. Our wrinkles are not imperfections. They are the map of a life intensely lived. With love, this is Emily Harrison reminding you that even in our darkest moments, there is always the possibility of a new dawn. If my story has resonated in your heart, tell me in the comments. Have you lived something similar? What would you do in my situation? Your voice is important to me and to all of us who form this beautiful community of elderly stories.